Well, John, I'm gonna let you get out of here. We're gonna bring David up here. We're gonna talk about some structure. Appreciate it, Bubba.
Come up there, David. All right, young man.
Big Dave. Tell me something good, bro.
Whiteboard. Brought the whiteboard.
For those that don't know on camera today, David O'Neill, good buddy of mine. Lake Fork guy, been here a long time, man. Talk to us.
Long time, yeah. Like bowling's like, what, are you 14? 13?
Yeah, I think he's 12.
He's got to be 13. I mean, look how young he looks.
His voice cracked when we were filming the other day, and I think he started puberty. I think
I was like, why my voice just cracked?
Yeah, he's I've been I'm about as old as dirt, but yeah, everything that you've heard these guys talk about here in the last little bit, I mean, it's solid state information, and to be able to drag properly is so critical. And like he said, that rod is paramount in feeling that stuff. So what I want to talk about a little bit is this week. We had a day where we had 10. We pulled up on the spot, and I marked some fish in the spot, and I do things a lot different than what these guys do. We do have those big baits rigged,
yeah,
but I do have drop shots rigged also.
Well, you know, one of the beautiful things about bass fishing is we all have our deal. Like, we all have our things that we prefer to do, or ways we're more comfortable, confident, and you are more of a finesse fisherman.
Well, I have both sides of it, but the reason why I do this is that when we pull up on some of these spots, and both of these guys said this, we've already seen these fish here, but a lot of times you can't get them to bite.
Yep.
And that is the #1 problem that we deal with. And this week we had a couple of times where, man, we could see them down there, and I mean, I'm famous for going down to 6-pound line in order to see if these fish will bite, even going down to a 5-inch worm. And so, I mean, when you can't get them to bite and you can tell they're bass, I mean, you've done all you can do. But in the situation is what you're going to do is like what Jonathan did, graphing those fish with a downscan. You can see those fish down there perfectly. Now, that's step 1. Step 2 is get these things to bite, and so that you can get a reward from it. And where you look on some of these spots is really pivotal. And this is a look at a spot. I wonder if I can see that real good.
Yeah, that's so.
That I was fishing this week, and I don't know if any of you have ever heard of, we're pattern fishing. All right, so this is a pattern. This is a point. All right, on a main lake point. So that's a pattern. But we're going a step further. There's a pattern within a pattern within a pattern. So what the heck does that mean? All right. So where we found these fish was right here. See this? And give me my marker here. What do I do with it? There it is. What we found was that those fish were relating into this area right here, around where this indention is off of this main lake point. Well, when I got to really looking at that, what made it even better was the third part of the pattern. A pattern within a pattern within a pattern. And the other part of the pattern was these group of stumps that were at the very back of what we would call a drain. You ever heard that term before? Drain? All right, a drain is when this was a hill, water would always run this way, and so that's why they etched this part out right here.
So what you've got here is you've got a big main lake point.
Main lake point.
Off the side of that point, there's a drain running up or down the side of that point.
And it's an indention, just like that. All right, and so that is the key fish structure on that given point. You can look all around this point most of the time, but this is where these fish were going to be. And then what made it even better was the fact that all of these right here are stumps. And this out here on the end of this point is roots. The stumps really aren't there. When you look at it on side image, you can't really see the stumps, but when you drag that big rig, like a Carolina rig, I'll use a Carolina rig a lot to feel what it is before I go to the drop shot. And this is what we determined was roots down there. Boy, because you could hang that 1 ounce weight up in that stuff down there. So it was just all roots out here. These were easy to see stumps that were on it, and every one of those fish were relating, to these stumps right here, on the pattern. And we ended up catching 10. First drop down, caught an 8-pounder. All right, very first. And I thought that was cool.
On a drop shot?
Yes, on 12-pound line.
You caught an 8-pounder on a drop shot on 12-pound line.
I've caught an 1161 is my biggest.
Timber.
Well, no, wait a minute. I will concur.
This doesn't sound fun.
I'll concur to what he said a while ago. We don't fish it everywhere, but in places where these stumps right here, this isn't tall trees.
So you are a little bit selective about.
Yes, absolutely.
What can you get away with?
100%. What we can get away with. These stumps really are only sticking off the bottom this much. Yeah. So you can get away with that in this situation right here. But when you drag that big a shaky head or a jig around down this stuff right here, and if you can't get them to bite, then you shift gears and go. What I'll usually do is I'll have a client throw in the jig, and then I'll be throwing a drop shot, and I'll have another client using a drop shot also, because what we want to see is what we can get to trigger. Most of the time, because of the light line, somebody's going to get bit on the drop shot first. When those fish fire up, then the jig is.
Then sometimes you can catch them on a jig and isolate the bigger bass.
Yeah, you'll catch them on a jig, you'll catch them on the big shaky head. The 17, 20-pound line will work. And so it's all about what it's going to take to get those fish to fire, and then you can throw in the heavy artillery. I've grown up doing the lighter stuff a lot. I caught 1161 in a tournament. We won one of the media bass here one time with that, and I've caught a lot of double-digit bass. The key scenario to this is that not very often do you have, it's not in standing timber. It'll never be in standing timber. It's either going to be in clean bottoms, which right now out here on this lake right here is what I graphed with the last 3 days in another guy's boat, because my lower unit has been blown up for the last 8 days. But that's what we did. We ran 20 some odd spots looking to try to copy something like this, trying to find a structure within a structure and a pattern within a pattern. And so this is where you have to have some innate knowledge of your sonar, your Lowrance, Humminbird, whatever you're using, in order to isolate these things. And don't be in no hurry. Get on a point, and it's a grid. Make yourself a grid and see if you can discover things on there. Put you some waypoints on there and see if those waypoints create some type of pattern. And you know, I mean, a lot of times you have to go back and erase those waypoints, because you'll get a zillion waypoints on your graph before you know it. So
what I like to do is I like to have a different waypoint type for everything that I mark. And then I have, like, I'll change the colors when I mark fish icons. Like structures I want to just leave there permanently anyway. But so what I'll do is I'll mark structures with like a tree or a rock or a piece of grass or whatever I'm marking structure with. And then I'll mark the fish with fish icons, but I'll change the colors day to day. And about every third or fourth day, I'll go back and delete by symbol that one color. So I have my last couple days of history there, but that where they were 3 or 4 days ago doesn't really matter to me. So I'll delete that.
So the lesson what we're trying to convey right here, right now is that every point that you're going to look at, especially, and I'm saying points because at this time of the year, the fish are starting to transition out. And like you said a while ago, there's not very many out there just yet. And I mean, we caught one spot that we found those fish on. I went to 20 other spots and picked one maybe here, one maybe there. And so those fish weren't there yet. And my take on this, because I've been doing this for 500 years, is the fact that I still think it's a little bit early yet. As the water temps rise, those fish will move and start moving out deeper and deeper and deeper as the water temp starts to gain. And that warmer water, there's still a little bit cooler water down, but as that warmer water gets down into the water column, then those fish will actually move out with it. And there's a couple of 2 or 3 other patterns here. Wood's one of them. There's just certain things that's really shows up picture perfect, where as you get into the early part of May, they're going to be up in 4, 5, 6, 7, and then as you get up, the water temp rises, those things just start easing their way out. A friend of mine 3 days ago caught an 889 in 7 foot of water, and over 25 inches long. Right, and so yesterday I caught some on a frog. Yesterday, so
it was really cool this week the way the weather worked out, because the beginning of the week and over the weekend it was like hot, sunny, not hot but sunny, you know, calm on Monday, really sunny, calm on Monday, and we were able to catch fish offshore. And then Tuesday, same deal, and then Wednesday and Thursday it was like super cloudy, and super cool for this time of year. And it, like, you could see it go, okay, the offshore bite, and then like slowly throughout the week the offshore bite got worse. But the back of the creek bite, the grass bite, the shallow bite got better and better. Like, and then now today it probably went the other way. Yeah, because it was overcast that day and cool, and so we went up shallow, and I threw the frog, got bit on the frog with a guy I had with me. He decides he pulls out a wacky worm and starts throwing that thing around, and boy, he started catching them on that. And I was like, wow. And I mean, I couldn't get him to hit the frog, but he could get him to hit that wacky worm. He was catching more on the wacky worm than I was on the frog. The point to this whole story is that there's still fish shallow, there's still fish in mid depths, and there's still some fish deep. And as this temperature rises, those fish are going to finally start to congregate. They're going to move out to the point where you're going to end up having a morning bite for about an hour or so, and then that'll shut down, and then you better go move yourself out and start looking deep for the rest of the day. And as it gets warmer, as we get up into June, then those points and
indentions like this on any given point. Every point has a character, no matter what point it is. If you study that point well enough, it's going to have an oddity to it that somewhere on that point is where those fish are going to hold consistently. And that's the trick, consistently. So that you can have a GPS coordinate that I say, well, I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna make some cast right there. I'm only gonna throw 5 or 6 or 7 times. They're either there or they're not, all right? And that's what we do on a lot of these points around here when it gets into this time of the year. And then the strange thing about that is that as it gets up into July, then the things start to change even through mid-July as you get up closer to August. And so it's just a big puzzle that you have to put together and learn that puzzle, and then you can duplicate that as you go into a lot of different places around the lake.
We kind of discussed that a little bit last week when we were talking about structure, or 2 weeks ago when we did something, we were talking about different structures in it. You know, there are different types of structure and different types of patterns that, you know, as the summer progresses, things change, the types of structure they're relating to and all that. So, you know, it was, for me, like the earliest deal is those super long main lake points seem to be the best really early. And then as we get on, it just transitions into different things. And sometimes when you get on into July, like it's all about pond dams and humps.
Yep, exactly.
Like, you know, steeper drops, smaller tops. The hotter it gets, you know, longer, flatter, earlier in the offshore deal. And the good thing is, we'll be here every 2 weeks, and we'll have the guys network every week, and we sure will keep you up to speed on which ones we're fishing right now. You know what I mean? That's the one thing we've always tried to do is provide the most detailed information, you know, because it's not really the bass fishing culture way to tell all the details of everything like this. Like what David talked about tonight. Like people say, okay, go fish main lake points with some timber on it, but they don't tell you this and they don't tell you this. You know what I'm saying? Like we've always strived to go more in depth than what you're used to getting and give you guys more help and really help you zero in on the fish better. And we will continue to do that. As this summer pattern change, we will talk about offshore structure all summer long because it's definitely a factor. We'll also talk about, there's some grass growing in the lake pretty good this year. Starting to grow. And as long as that continues to develop, we'll talk about how to fish that offshore and main, you know, middle of the creek grass as it gets hotter, because it's a very similar deal to this, just in a lot less water.
The interesting thing about this little setup right here was, you can see right here, these stumps are in 16 foot. And so that shows you the transition of those fish moving out, and they stopped right here. All right. As this stop sign, I should have put a stop sign right there. Now, as this water gets warmer and warmer and warmer, then this out here in 24 foot, these roots out here, crankbait heaven. And we'll set up on the side. We'll set the boat up over here, and then throw that crankbait across this way. Is what we're going to do, and get a 10XB down to that spot right there, and then that's going to be the home run. Because when those fish move out, and then they're pretty easy to see on the graph once they move out. And so I'll still do the power stuff just like him, but when it gets a little bit finicky and we're running and getting many bites, we're going to do a little shifting of gears. So that's just the way I roll.
Absolutely.
But we do, like he said, I fish a lot of the stringer tournaments here, and so we really don't go after the overs. If we catch one, and this time of the year is where we can catch one by accident during this window. It's only this window of late April and early May, doing the patterns that we fish when we're trying for those big unders, right? And that's why we end up with some good sacks. And then lo and behold, bang, you end up catching, you know, a 9-pounder. That's an over, and then end up winning the tournament.
So do you think that, you know, like you said, it's kind of in this window where you'll be catching unders and overs. You might catch an over in the same pattern, same spot.
Exactly.
So do you think that's because this is a transition time where the fish get mixed up, and then later in the summer they kind of end up grouping by size a little more?
I don't think they're grouped by size yet. That's my opinion.
No, that's what I mean. Like later in the
year, as
they'll group by size, but right now as they're transitioning,
everything's scattered, and what we determine is scattered. And I'll tell you why. That we all know, and these guys, I don't know if they're going to concur or not, but I mean, it's hard to go out there and catch 25 bass in one given day. I don't know any soul that's doing that on a consistent basis right now.
Not this year.
That shows you how scattered those fish are. And so a good day for a lot of guides has been 10 fish. Now, granted, like he had 8 and a 7 and a couple of 6s and stuff like that. Well, you know, you got that big bait game going on. You can catch quality fish like that. Thing is that there's just not enough bites. When those fish start to gather up and gang up and pulling together, and they'll show up. We had a spot 2 years ago. I'll never forget. It was June the 2nd. We pulled up on a spot at 3:15, And the first 35 we caught, the smallest was 6 pounds.
That doesn't sound real.
Honest to God.
That doesn't sound real.
Happened.
Well, it's Lake Fork.
The first
probably
35 did not have a bass under 6 pounds.
That's crazy.
It was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. And what was even more about that, it was a point. All right, those fish had all ganged up and they were all grouped up. And I ain't telling you a story. I'll put my hand on the Bible right now and tell you that. And the little guy that was, he's from Shreveport. You know, I was just beyond understanding, amazed at how this could be. And we had a lot of, we quit taking pictures of 7 pounder, right? And he picks up the drop shot again and he throws it out in 30 foot of water to the end of the point while I'm talking to the other guy. Next thing I know, he's back there bowed up. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. It was 2 years ago, June 2nd. And I pick up my drop shot and I hurl a long cast as far as I could throw it out. At the end of this point, we caught another 40 up to 5.5. Right? These were all smaller fish. Those big fish were setting up on the top of that point in 22 foot of water, batted bidet. And there's only been one other time that I had that happen on a main lake point.
You know, those days are rare and special. And thing, we've talked about this lake a couple times tonight, but man, you fish here enough, and this lake has these moments like what David's talking about, where no matter how many fish you've caught in your life, no matter what you've seen and what you've done in bass fishing, this lake always seems to just every great once in a while, not very, I mean, just very rare, but every great once in a while, it'll do something that no matter what you've seen or done, it's just like you can't believe it. You know, some of the deals happened to me, and this has been years ago. I don't know, it's been a long time.
And I know some other guys that you know, it's an accident that happens that you just get lucky and it's the right
you
time.
find the right school at the right time.
The right time, and we went back there the next day, not even close.
There you go.
Not even close.
Yeah,
those fish were moving, transition early June like that, and they were on their way. There happened to be a creek close by, and I think they just decided they were going to stop on that point. That day, at that time, we got insanely lucky that day.
It's unbelievable. I know the one that stands out in my mind when you tell that story, and the fish weren't quite as big on average as what you're talking about, but we found a school offshore, this has been years ago, but we just found a school that like literally covered the whole graph, like covered the whole, and it looked like a sand bass school, but it wasn't sand bass because the arcs were a lot bigger, you know what I mean? And we threw a buoy marker out and sat beside that buoy marker for 4 hours. For 4 hours, we sat beside that buoy marker, and we couldn't have gone more than 5 or 10 minutes without a bite. I have no idea how many fish we caught. No idea. But we caught fish for 4 straight hours, and the only reason we quit catching fish was because that guy's wife made him go home, and I never invited that guy back on a fishing trip ever again. Because he made us leave in the middle of that, the best day of my life. Yeah. The greatest catching day of my life, that guy made me leave in the middle of it because the wife needed him home.
Those days are rare.
That's a pattern that's still going a little bit. That deal is kind of fading. I know some of you may have heard me talk about the brim bed pattern that I was fishing out here, and I've kind of abandoned that deal. It's slowed down on me, but that deal is, there's still a little bit of that going on. But we did have a really good brim spawn this year, and it was, man, that's a lot of fun. When you can just, because you just go in there and fish however you want to. Like, it's just like you go pond fishing. You go there and throw a little Texas rig around or throw a wacky worm. It doesn't matter. You throw a chatterbait, but those fish are just hanging around in front of these brim, and they just eat anything that comes through there that looks anything like a brim. Yeah, it's awesome.
And well, too, the water temp, I've always been told, and you can help me out here, 80 degrees is the brim spawn window at the water, 80 degrees?
You know, I think it's a lot like bass spawn. You know, there's generalities to the water temp, but it's more about daylight period, moon phase. It's like a bass spawn. To me, the deal is you got the bass spawn that gets started in March, sometimes February. You got the bass spawn, and then usually about 2/3 of the way through the bass spawn, 3/4 of the way through the bass spawn, you'll have a shad spawn start, right? And about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the shad spawn, you'll have a brim spawn start. So I just kind of judge it. I start looking for bass in February. It's like when the water temps get right and I get a moon phase. When I get something in the upper 50s and I get a moon phase, I start looking for bass beds. And then I just kind of gauge it based on what I'm seeing on the spawning cycle. I know when I get about 2/3, 3/4 through the bass spawn, I'm going to start looking for shad spawn. And vice versa with the brim spawn on the shad spawn. So
brim spawn always seems to be the tail end. It's the
last one. It's the last one, yeah. And then once the brim are done spawning, nothing spawns until the brim spawn that happens. There's a brim spawn that happens in the fall as well.
Yeah. So. But that's why those fish a lot of times are up there shallow on a frog. They're chasing that brim.
Yeah, you've heard a million times about throwing a frog in May in this area. Well, it's a brim spawn deal. Yeah, you know, a lot of times it is a brim spawn.
And when we were checking that spot the other day, I caught those fish on the frog. I'm watching, and every now and then I would hear. And that's what you're looking for. If you hear nothing, then you're not going to get a bite. in
Not on
general.
top water.
not on frog. And I mean, I have to have some activity on that surface in the middle of pads, grass, whatever it is. There has to be some activity, or those things, you know, you're wasting your time.
Yep, that's a good point. You know, the topwater bite has not just been, you know, we've talked about this a little bit. This May has been different than a lot of the normal May. And last May was a little bit different too, but this May has just been a little bit inconsistent. Normally in May, you throw topwater every day and catch some fish. And this year, there's been days where we caught some fish on topwater, and then there's been days where it's like cloudy, a little bit windy, and I'm going, we're going to catch them on top today, and you do nothing. And the big deal is, you know, I've just had to resort to what David's talking about. Listen to the fish. You know, how many times have you heard the pros say, listen to the fish? Well, if those fish are causing ruckus on the surface, if the bait is scattering on the surface, if you're hearing little suctions, little pops, go ahead and throw your topwater. You'll probably get some bites. But man, if you're not hearing any surface activity, there is zero reason right now to pick up topwater when you hear nothing on the surface. And that's just not, normally this time of year, you pick up topwater every day and catch some fish.
Yeah.
Early especially, you know. For me, that hasn't been the case this year. I don't know.
This has been a strange shad spawn this year.
Everything's
strange.
But we've just had all this, you know, we've had rain and we've
Right,
had,
right.
you know, cooler water temps, and we've had a lot of change. We just haven't had a whole lot of stability of anything in the weather. And that's the deal, guys. You may have heard me say this before, but the biggest thing in bass fishing conditions-wise is stability. Like, we can catch them when it gets real hot, and we can catch them when it gets cold, and we can catch them when it's just right. But what's really hard is when it's never anything the same for any period of time. Like when that water is stable, like if it's just getting hot and getting hotter and it's stable, you know, steady getting hotter, and you got stability in the water column, man, you can start patterning fish. That's the whole deal of consistency, is being able to go back to a pattern day after day. Well, when the conditions change every 2 days and you got a 40-degree night, you know, we had 40-degree nights in May, you know, I mean, when that is happening, you got 90 degrees today and it was 65 the other day, and the patterns change every day, and you're just having to always kind of be on your toes and stick and move a little bit.
Well, that's when we pulled up on a spot last week, and I wheeled around a corner and I thought, oh, there's some herons. And we pulled up there, and it was early in the morning, and we started throwing there, and then some egrets flew in. I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And you could see the shad. They were up there and they were moving.
Yeah.
But I'm watching this and I'm watching this, and what I'm not seeing is, I'm not seeing that. And I'm not seeing that. I told the guys, I said, dang it, man, I don't like the looks of this. And we're throwing, did not get a bite. And no birds are standing there laughing at us.
That's right.
All right? And so I thought, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And we stayed in that area for an hour and 15 minutes, never got a bite. So we started easing backed out a little bit into 6, 7, 8 foot of water, picked up a swim bait with an underspin on it, and had them throwing that, slow rolling it down that depth, and all of a sudden, boom, the guy's got, he catches a 533, and then the guy in the back catches a 6.5 that were out a ways from him. And I thought,
that's funny you said. We actually, this guy sitting right here, we were fishing some grass, and there were shad spawning over this grass, and they were just doing the thing, you know. And on a grass spawn, it's not like a bank, you know. On the bank deal, the shad spawn, they line up on the bank. The grass spawn, they might be over here or over there. They just kind of get over that grass and spawn. And there would be these pods of shad that would just pop up and start spawning and doing their little boiling and flickering thing. And they're like, oh, look at all the shad boiling. I'm like, well, they're not. I call it flushing. It's like when the bass run through them, it's like whoosh, they flush, like you see them scattered. It's like, man, nothing's flushing them. Like they're not flushing. They're not running. They're not scared of anything. And sure enough, there was no single time that them shad popped up that we caught anything right there. Now we caught fish outside of that and around on the grass and stuff, but they just, for whatever reason, they weren't getting flushed, and those bass weren't feeding on them. I don't know why.
those things will make you talk to yourself in your sleep.
Yep,
Promise you.
sure will.
As much as we do it. Questions?
Yeah, anybody got questions? It's hard to get
Got
a
to be
question.
a
in this
question.
group.
That deal right there. Talking about these guys throwing this big bait, and you're downsizing. How much are you downsizing to do on your drop shot? Like,
Down to I'll normally use a trick worm on it most of the time, and then strange thing, because like you said, if I've got a clean bottom like this where there's not this junk right here, and I can see those things up in that 20 to 24 foot of water, and I know I know just about most all these points out here, the ones that are clean and the ones that are dirty. All right, and we use a wacky rig with a Magnum trick worm on a wacky rig with 12-pound line. We caught some big ones on that rig right there using a Magnum trick worm. And
You
then
put a nail weight in that to get it down?
Nope. Just a drop shot weight, 3/8 drop shot weight, And
you're using the Magnum strip worm on the drop shot.
On the drop shot.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're wacky worming it a foot off the bottom, or 15 inches off the bottom, in 22, 24 foot of water, provided it's clean. If I can see them down there and I'm having a little bit of difficult time, I'll start searching around at another avenue that they might bite. All right. My last resort is to start changing down the line size, in which I've got too many stories to tell you about that, how that's been successful before, especially in tournaments. But if I can't get them to hit anything on the larger size, we'll start going down to a 6-inch worm, a 5-inch worm in that class right there. And then I'll usually only resort to the 4.5s if I go down to 6-pound line on a drop shot.
And that's only in like the most extreme case.
Just most extreme case, going for unders, just unders. All right, if I'm in a tournament, stringer tournament, looking for unders.
For anybody watching that doesn't know, Lake Fork has a slot limit. You can't keep fish between 16 and 24 inches. So in a tournament, you have to sometimes specifically target fish under 16 inches.
And that's what we do. I mean, we try to go find the fish that are that 15.5 to 16 inch window, and that I love that because that's a challenge in itself. These guys are monster chasers.
I don't want nothing to do with them 15.
I know, and he's a monster chaser, and I mean, to them, you know, the 22 to 25 inch fish is their dream, you know. But I love fishing tournaments so much that 15.5 to 16 inch fish is a challenge, and sometimes those fish group up. And there's been a lot of times we've had 10 to 11 pound bags where those 15 3/4 inch fish, we'll catch several in one area.
Again, for those of you that aren't familiar with that and haven't done that before, 10 or 11 pound bag under 16 inches is like extremely tough to do.
Extremely hard to do.
Yeah, it's
extremely hard to do. And so,
what hook are you using when you drop shot the Magnum?
the question, he asked what hook I'm going to use for drop shot in the Magnum. Strangely enough, I use small hooks like a number 2. All right, my tournament partner now. This is a interesting story. We're fishing this tournament tomorrow for Sartons, and he got so tired of having fish not hooking up really as good. He went to a 2/0 hook on 12-pound line. Now I told him, I said that
I'm gonna hang out with your tournament partner. That's my
you're gonna suffer in the bite category. All right, and so every tournament that we fish, I usually get more bites than he does because he's using that bigger hook. Now, granted, he hooks a good one, he lands it, but he has a history of catching overs on the drop shot. Last year, I think he caught 15 overs on the drop shot here in a lot of these tournaments that are around here. And so that's why he's opted to go with that. Now, there is a downside to that number 2 hook. I use the number 1 Gamakatsu EWG. And the problem with them is you got to have your drag set picture perfect, right? And you've also got to have a rod that's not too stiff. We use 6 to 12 line graded rods for that, all right? And so when you catch a big one on that rod right there, that drag's got to pull, or you'll have what happened to me about 5 days ago when I had one that I could not stop. He was pulling, and I'm thinking, I'm on troll motor now, I'm chasing him, right? Because, I mean, I've got everything set up right. Well, I mean, he pulled and made a run so hard that, I mean, I lost him. Well, when I reeled it in, the hook was broke. He broke the hook. So there is a possibility of that, but the number 1 thing is, I got the bite.
Yeah. You got to get them on before you can get them off. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
So it's not a perfect world in that, but I mean, listen, I like getting bites, and I mean, you know, when we target these fish in these tournaments, my goal is to have a big day of catching nothing but unders, you know, and then we'll try to put together the best bag we can. The tournament we fished a couple of weekends ago, I think we caught 22 that day, and we only had 2 slots, and they were only 17-inch slots. So you can see the variation in the games here, the way that Jonathan and Billy attack the game versus the way a lot of times I attack the game, just because I'm a tournament guy.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, that's, if you watch the Elite Series or MLF or any of those big tours, man, how many times do you see there's guys that go about it different ways, even in the same tournament on the same lake, same day? That is maybe my favorite part about bass fishing, is there's really no wrong answers to questions sometimes. And there certainly is no absolutes to answers to questions in any case of bass fishing. And a guy that is going out throwing a drop shot can catch fish just as good as a guy that's throwing a big swim bait and vice versa. I mean, it's, we stand up here and give you our experience and our outlook on it. But, man, it doesn't mean that we're 100% right on time by any means at all. It is so cool in this sport how any given thing can be a key. You know, we sat up here and told you how color on these deep dragon baits isn't really that important. But you know what? Sometimes it might be. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes the color might be the deal. And that's the beautiful thing about this sport, this game.
Yeah.
You can do it different ways.
I'll fish power just like the rest of them, but I don't do it the percentage that these guys do it.
And to be fair, I'll fish finesse. Like, I'll throw a drop shot and a wacky one when I have to.
We have an ongoing challenge between me and him. We're supposed to have this match of drop shot versus shaky head.
We do need to
that.
do that.
Hasn't happened.
Yes, we need to do that. Yes. We talked about that, and then life and work gets in the way. Well, I forgot all about that. We need to do drop shot versus shaky head. I'm in.
So you're in, huh?
You know I'm in. The only thing is, the slot won't count that day.
Slot don't count.
Slot don't count that day. We're not counting slot. I'm not disqualifying my 4-pounders and counting your 2s. I'm not doing it.
Oh, come on now.
Or your 4-pounders and my 2. That would be right.
That's right.
Man, that's awesome. Hey, any other questions? We never like to leave anything unanswered. Only thing singing.
Study your graph.
Study
Study the obstacles out there. It's at your disposal. Keep an eye on what you're seeing down there, and you'll see a lot of sand bass right now. But don't be deterred, because those big fish right now are in the middle of those sand bass.
We are catching some big fish around sand bass. Not a lot, but you'll catch sand bass, and you'll catch 1 or 2 or 3 largemouth.
He'd be surprised that I tripped Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be throwing a big spoon almost all day. We'll catch a zillion sand bass, but I bet you we do catch an 8-pounder bass in the middle of those too.
Yeah. We've been doing the same thing with Alabama rigs. You get around the sand bass schools and throw an Alabama rig, catch sand bass every cast, and then every once in a while one of them green ones jumps on there and it's a big one.
Yeah, they're in there.
What's that?
Hard jerkbait.
A hard jerkbait? I haven't been throwing one. You know, I'll tell you, if you find some shad, so there's still a little bit of shad. If you run up on some shad spawn, a jerkbait's a great bait to throw around shad spawn. And jerkbait's I'm not the biggest jerkbait fisherman in the world. And I really, honestly, when we get to this time of year, I don't even think about it until fall, late fall.
Strangely enough, I did that last week, and I did not get a bite on it.
Well,
I threw a jerkbait in the shad during the shad.
They were biting it earlier in the year, for sure, on that shad spawn deal, and even before the shad spawn, just kind of fishing it. Yeah,
I was really shocked, but. You know,
yeah, I don't know, when it gets hot, you know, and I know like KVD throws a jerkbait in the summer and all that. Man, when it gets hot around here, I just don't ever really think it's not something that comes into my mind as a bait to throw. You know, it's not something that I've really ever utilized this time of year. So I don't know. I don't know that's, you know, I don't know that you can't go catch them on a jerkbait in the summer out here. It's just not something I've ever done. Again, what we were just talking about a minute ago, same deal. So
I wouldn't.
One thing I do want to ask you guys to do for us is if y'all come up with any ideas on topics that y'all want to hear in the seminars or in the comments for the people watching online, please let us know, man. We try to come up with ideas that are current and happening now. It's pretty much our main focus. But anything that you guys want to hear, whatever y'all would like to hear talk, we would love to give you our perspective on that even more than what we're coming up with. So, any more questions? Okay. Well, hey, man, thank y'all so very much. We want to thank Lake Fork Marinas. John, appreciate you tonight, buddy. Thank you very much. And most importantly, again, thank every one of y'all for coming out and meeting the world to us. And you guys come out here and let's just run our heads about what we love to do every day. And we will see y'all right here in 2 weeks. Thank y'all.